Happy Monday, folks. I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend and are ready for the week that we have ahead of us. It's going to be a jam-packed one from an economic data point of view, which we'll be refreshing you on. Also, from a company earnings point of view, the largest companies in the world have their earnings this week. And we also are going to get on Wednesday the much anticipated Crypto Task Force report. We're going to be refreshing you on the week ahead of you towards the end of the video. Now, last week, we were really looking at this kind of transition to an alt-season. And we said that we're seeing signs of that with major institutions starting to move towards ETH, whether that be via the ETFs or whether that be via companies now looking to create kind of MicroStrategy-esque businesses, obviously based on Ethereum. And we are starting to see that. We looked at the Mike Novogratz and Galaxy Digital 80,000 Bitcoin that was sold, likely to rotate into Ethereum. I know there was lots of conspiracies floating around that 80,000 Bitcoin. They, of course, have been quietened, and we essentially have the source of them being Galaxy Digital. But today I woke up and I was rather excited. Every single Monday, you guys know that we like to look at CoinShares Digital Asset Fund Flow Report. Now, this aggregates ETFs, ETNs, and really any kind of funds that are attached to crypto. And it looks at the overall inflows or outflows and what's seen those inflows and outflows. And it says digital asset inflows surged to record monthly highs amid Ethereum-led rally. We're getting further confirmation in regards to this shift happening and the next phase of this bull market taking place. And that phase, as illustrated here, this is a kind of a chart that looks at the flow of money into crypto. Bitcoin is always the leader. It's the tide that rises and sinks all ships. Then you have Ethereum being the second largest altcoin, really the dominant altcoin still. And then you have sort of large caps outside of that. And I think we're going to phase two. That is actually going to benefit. And I don't hold any Ethereum other than really scraps left over from bull markets. Really, this is very bullish for the altcoin sector as a whole. And of course, we've got all the technicals to back up where we think the charts are very much pointing at a great time ahead of us. And we will be looking at that towards the end of the video. But we're getting further confirmation in regards to this new phase, this altcoin phase of the market. This is always the worst time for BTC maxis. Also, we're looking at BTC DOM. That's very much confirming what we're expecting, or could confirm if it breaks down from this head and shoulders we might refresh you on. It says digital asset investments products saw 1.9 billion in inflows last week, bringing the month-to-date inflows to a record 11.2 billion. Ethereum saw $5 billion in inflows in 10 days. It's taken it a year to get to 10 billion. It did half of that in 10 days. And we looked at that as illustrated from Eric Balanchunas. Ethereum attracted 1.59 billion in inflows, the second largest week ever on record, with year-to-date flows surpassing 2024's total. We're 7 months into 2025. And obviously, this is the second largest week. The first largest week was indeed last week. While Solana and XRP saw strong inflows, Bitcoin recorded minor outflows, highlighting potential ETH anticipation rather than broad altcoin season. I don't know why Bitcoin outflows would represent that it's not a broad altcoin season. I think it is, and you can see that from Solana. I mean, look at Solana's inflows and look at XRP's inflows. I mean, they are crazy. But of course, look at Ethereum's inflows compared to Bitcoin. Last week, I think it was 1.8, one something. It was a few million off of Bitcoin's flows, and now it's actually engulfed Bitcoin in terms of flows. This is that shift that we've been talking about that's happening, that institutions are signaling to us. We're seeing in regards to fund flows. We're also seeing in regards to companies actually creating MicroStrategy-esque Ethereum or Ethereum strategy-esque companies, of which I'm going to be buying. I'll give you price predictions on the likes of Tom Lee's Bitmine Immersion Technologies. I actually think that's going to do well. You could be looking at about 20x for that. And I'm certainly want to be on board with that. You know, if you're in the UK, you have ISA allowances, which is basically capital gains free money that you can make. Anyway, it's a digital asset investment product saw 1.9 billion in inflows last week, marking the 15th consecutive week of positive sentiment. This pushes month-to-date flows to a record 11.2 billion, significantly surpassing the 7.6 billion seen in December 2024 following the US election. Regional flows were mixed. The United States and Germany saw strong inflows of 2 billion and 70 million, respectively, offsetting outflows from Brazil, Canada, and Hong Kong. Ethereum stood out unusually, leading with 1.59 billion in inflows last week, its second largest week on record. Year-to-date flows of Ethereum have now reached 7.79 billion, surpassing the total for all of last year. Bitcoin, by contrast, experienced minor outflows totaling 175 million, a notable divergence from broader altcoin trends. This has raised the question of whether we are entering an alt season. And this is confirming it, in my opinion, or another confirming factor. While inconclusive, there are some signs. Solana and XRP attracted substantial inflows of $311 million and $189 million respectively, with Sui also seeing $8 million. Sui likely going to 3x, I think, in over these coming months. Certainly by the end of the year, I think we could see that. However, beyond these names, inflows tapered off quickly. Several altcoins saw outflows, including Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash. Don't think people are too bothered about that. These altcoin inflows may be driven less by broad-based enthusiasm and more by anticipated surrounding potential US ETF launches. Remember, we're seeing these inflows in altcoins without them even being allowed to be invested in the likes of the UK. Yes, the FCA have moved to allow for us to be able to buy ETNs. It made no sense that they didn't allow that. You could buy on Coinbase, spot crypto, but you couldn't buy an institutional product. They've removed that. They are going to allow ETNs, and also in the US, we will, once we get more sort of clarity, legal clarity, see a wave of ETFs hit the markets. You want to be positioned before that wave of capital, if you will. But we're seeing this across the board, this shift towards Ethereum. It signals a more broad alt season. A little bit of interesting news also. Tether, once again, have minted another $1 billion in USDT. Now, I've said USDT isn't going anywhere. The US, because I believe we're going to experience another Bretton Woods moment, I did a good Patreon meeting on this where I outline the big picture of what's going on here, the ramifications of the global monetary order, and how crypto is going to essentially induce another Bretton Woods moment. I think the reason the US is rushing to stablecoins is because they are going to lose their... there's no need for the United States dollar. Doesn't mean it won't be the dominant currency, because we still need currencies, and I think they're going to propagate that through US stablecoins. But there's no need to run on a dollar reserve currency where you need to peg to the dollar and US debt. That's a massive question. And the world that we move towards is one where you don't need the dollar to operate a global system. These distributed ledgers, everybody can trust, and you can operate that global system upon. Big topic we're just sort of touching on, but I think Tether fits into that role in the sense of it's doing what the US is mandated to do, and that's essentially proper dollar dominance and introduce buyers to treasuries. I mean, they have $120 billion of treasuries. They're the 7th largest, nearly 6th if they were a country in terms of purchaser. So interesting, another $1 billion. That's liquidity that's likely going to find its way to the markets, in my opinion. We'll talk about the markets in just a second. It's a crazy week we've got ahead of us. We looked at this yesterday. Nothing really today other than some company earnings. Who have you got today? You got you can see all these companies that you've got earnings coming out on today. Tuesday's a big one. You got Visa, Spotify, UPS, Boeing, PayPal, Starbucks, etc., etc. Wednesday's even bigger. You've got Meta, Microsoft, Robinhood, recently listed Hedera. Shout out to them. Ford, so on and so forth. And then Thursday, you've got Apple, Amazon, Strategy B, obviously previously MicroStrategy, Coinbase, Reddit, IoT. You've got MasterCard, Roku, so on and so forth. And then on Friday, you've also got some big companies. And to contend with all of that, you've got a lot of economic data coming out, predominantly on Wednesday, as you see German GDP, Eurozone GDP, US ADPs, Canadian Bank of Canada rate decision, and of course, you've got the Fed rate decision and the speech that comes after. That's more important. They're expected to hold rates. Also on Wednesday, you do have, on the 30th of July, the President's Working Group on Digital Assets has compiled a 180-day report. It will be releasing on the 30th of July. America is now leading the way on digital assets. I'm going to be, of course, reporting on that and scrolling through it. But you've got that also on Wednesday. And then Thursday, you've got the BOJ rate decision. They're expected to raise rates. Is there going to be a further unwinding of the yen carry trade? We'll see. I think a lot of people would have already jumped that ship when they did the first 25 basis points. Then you've got US initial jobless claims. You've got PMIs. Friday, you've got non-farm and US ISM manufacturing PMIs. it's going to be a jam-packed week. And I think you're going to get, I think the markets today, somewhat expecting volatility and unsure what to do. But the important thing is, do not focus on day-to-day price action, focus on the broader trend. And we've been spot on in regards to Bitcoin. We also believe you've got this sensational time ahead of you in regards to the total market cap, excluding Bitcoin. But Bitcoin's going to be going up in this context. And I think you're on the cusp of Bitcoin dominance rolling over. And we looked at this head and shoulders sort of signifying phase 3, which is going to result in phase 4 taking place. We're just looking for that break and that broad alt season that's potentially signaled to us by that shift that we're seeing towards Ethereum. A lot of ground covered, guys. Get ready for the week ahead. If you're not already a subscriber, do consider becoming one. We'll keep you up to date with everything happening in the cryptocurrency space that's worth paying attention to within the past 24 hours every single day and further, and things that we think you should know about that are relevant. That's it from me, guys. I'm going to love and leave you all. If you want to join the Patreon, link in the description. I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.